Hi everyone, and welcome to AWS Community Day. I'm Emma, and I will be talking today about Alexa skills and how to build one. This is actually my third AWS Community Day presentation. I gave one earlier in the year at the online Community Day, also about an Alexa skill, and I also gave one at the in-person one in Melbourne in 2019, talking about data science. So I'm really excited to be joining you all again today. So a little bit about me, I just finished my Master of Data Science at the University of Melbourne, so yay, that's really exciting. And I am currently working as a data analyst at Startup Galaxy. So Startup Galaxy is a directory of Australian startups, accelerators, investors, and it also has a job board. So if you're interested in the startup ecosystem, I really highly recommend checking it out. And it was also the inspiration for the skill I am presenting today. As while working there, I sort of have been exposed to the number of accelerators, investors, and activity in the ecosystem and how there's so much going on. And there's so many different sources of news. I thought, how cool would it be if I could create an Alexa skill that sort of gives you the best bits of what's happening in the startup ecosystem. So that's sort of the inspiration for the skill I made. And yes, I'm really excited to share with you what I've been working on. So in the presentation today, I will be going through an overview of Alexa skills, just sort of some basics about it, what tools there are to build it, and then I'll be talking you through 2 skills I made using those different tools available, and then some reflections about some key takeaways that I've had through my process of building. And I also, in the talk today, I really hope that it inspires you to build an Alexa skill, and I hope that you see how easy it is to get started with making skills and how there's lots of resources and support for you to get building. So that's what I'm hoping you take away from the presentation today. I hope you're inspired and want to build. So yeah, starting with an overview of Alexa skills, let's get started. So Alexa, for those who don't know, is a virtual AI assistant made by Amazon. And this diagram is just sort of a visualization of a user's interaction with the device. So the user speaks to Alexa, it translates the speech to text, figures out what the user is asking, calls the relevant functions to retrieve information to give back to the user as audio, as a speech. And it might require some more prompting from the user, or that might be the end of the interaction. So when you are developing an Alexa skill, it's important to be thinking about the context of how it would be used, thinking about making it conversational, something that would be engaging through speech and little audio visuals as well. So yeah, keeping in mind this workflow of like an Alexa skill is important, I think, when you are developing it. As it's really about making it a really engaging experience for a user. Okay, so you have a really amazing idea for a skill. So how can you make it into a reality? So there are 2 main options for you. So there are things called blueprints, which are no code required templates provided by Amazon to get a skill in the store in minutes. And then there's the developer console where you're coding, and you can work either from sort of some skeleton code that's provided, or you can just create a custom skill. So blueprints are a really great entry point, no code required, but you are working from a template, so you can't customize the user interactions and such, which you can do in the developer console. This is just the link to blueprints. So there's over 60 templates available here. This is the link to the Australian site. I did once make a skill on the American site, and so then I couldn't actually install it on my Alexa. So make sure you go to the Australian website. I believe it's the same for New Zealand as well. And yes, 60 templates, a variety of things. I often start with a blueprint to sort of see, well, is the problem I'm trying to solve, is there already a blueprint to get something working quickly? Lots of options there, and it's a good starting point, no code required, and it sort of gives you a sense of Alexa skills and what's possible with them. So that's blueprints. But if you want to be coding sort of the entire process from that ideation all the way to distributing it and coding, the developer console is the place to go. It's got everything in one place. You can build the skill, code it, test it. There's an Alexa simulator there. And then once you're ready to publish it, you can actually see how it's being used in the store through the Analytics tab. And you can also so you can see how people are using the skill, and is that how you're expecting it to be used, etc. So really lots to be done in the developer console. So that's that. Okay, so those are the two sort of pathways to building an Alexa skill. And now I'll show you how I went about building my flash briefing skill. I did one of each. I used a blueprint and I used the developer console for it. So my skill that I've built is called a flash briefing. So a flash briefing gives a summary of daily or weekly news. You just say to Alexa, Alexa, give me my flash briefing, and it gives you your 5 top news articles. So what you need to be able to build one is an idea, something that you want the flash briefing to be, and then you need to find a source of that news. You can provide the news either as an RSS, which means really simple syndication. It's a web feed that allows users and also applications, so Alexa, to be able to, it's a computer readable format, and it gets those updates from websites, or else you can provide JSON, and you can also provide audio or MP3 files, so it's good for podcasts as well. So lots of options there to get a flash briefing working. I have never played around with this stuff before, so I was learning while I was going along, learning about RSS feeds and such, to be able to get my skill up and running. As I said, you need 2 things to get a flash briefing started: an idea and a source of that news. So my idea was Aussie startup news, so highlighting key announcements or exciting things happening in the startup ecosystem. So how could I get that done? So I created just a WordPress RSS feed on my personal WordPress. I manually just added a few data points that was happening this week in the startup land and added that to my WordPress feed so I could provide Alexa a URL to be able to fetch that information from. It's currently not live data, I manually have to add it, but I think it was a really good place to start as this is my first exposure and you learn by doing, so that's how I approached the problem. This is just an example of RSS instance. So this is just a text RSS item. So Alexa would read out the title and the description, and you provide this URL to the skill to be able to access these updates. I just wanted to show this just as to let everyone know what an RSS item looks like. So I made a skill to begin with a blueprint, as you can just add your content, you can add your RSS text feed URL, as you can see here in the content image, and it just gets it up really quickly to check that, yeah, that sounds good, that it's looking good. So so I tried a blueprint to begin with, as wanted to check that the URL and everything was working well before investing in developing a custom skill. So with a blueprint, it's just a template, so you don't need to be thinking about these steps, but if you are building a custom skill, there's 4 main steps to building and developing a skill. So the first step is designing the interaction, so thinking about how the user would be interacting with it, what information you need, what other services you may require. So, and then if you have a really clear idea, robust interaction model, it makes it easy to build and code as you know what the skill's doing and what you need to build. And then from that, you test it, of course, and then you can move to distributing it to share what you've built. So those are the 4 main steps. You may have to go back to step 2 through testing, or may even need to go back to step 1, realizing, oh, I'm actually missing this important, utterance or something. So it's an iterative process, but these are the 4 main steps to creating your custom skill. This is just a visual of the structure of a skill. So this is actually from Aussie, from the Alexa team's presentation at AWS Summit Online earlier in the year. I would recommend checking out her stuff if you're interested. So a skill is sort of made up of a front end and a back end. So the front end is that user's interaction with Alexa. It's written in JSON. That's where you build what the user would be doing, and then that links to the back end, and like calling maybe a Lambda function in AWS, or calling an RSS feed or whatever. That's all handled in the back end, and the back end's often done in Python or Node.js, and that's where the meat of the skill is, and that's, you need to be thinking about how does the front end and the back end interact, and that really comes down to that designing the interactions, that first step. So having a clear idea of what you're wanting the skill to do makes it easier to build. So now moving on to step 1. So this isn't actually required for a flash briefing, because the flash briefing is just 1 line to the device, but I did just want to mention it. So this was actually from my earlier presentation I gave at the Community Day in July. So I just wanted to show you the terminology and things for Alexa. So the utterances are what the user says. So it consists of a wake word, a launch word, and a skill name. And then once you're in the skill, there's an utterance. So this is mapping the front end to the back end that I was talking about. So that utterance links to an intent that's sort of in the back end with a slot value. So then it calls the relevant information in the intent. And this is just one example of an utterance and intent. For a full model, you have lots of different options. So for my quiz skill, which is quite a simple Alexa skill, it had, I think, like about 8 intents. Lots of utterances, had to take into account how different people would activate the skill and such. So yeah, need a robust interaction model, and then you can start building. The second stage is the coding, the actual building of the skill. And again, this is done in the Alexa console. So for the flash briefing, I just had to give a custom error message, add in the feed, and you can add some custom things as well in the coding tab in the developer console. So this is the brains of the skill. And if needing help, there's lots of activity on forums and such. If you do hit any roadblocks in your development of Alexa skills, I've got links in the end of the presentation for people if they're interested. So you've coded something. How do you actually test it? Do you need an Alexa device? No, you don't actually need an Alexa device, as in the developer console, there actually is an Alexa simulator. So no need for a device, and you can also change the tone and personality of your skill to add a bit of, interest, something different to the skill. You can do that in the testing. And something that I also liked in the testing part is that there's a log of what the skill does when you maybe say an utterance. It shows you the logic of how it gives you the answer, so it's really easy to debug and figuring out what is actually going on. Why is it giving me some unexpected output? The log in the testing console really helps you. And yeah, so that's how testing works in the developer console. So here is my skill in the Australian Amazon store. It's just a flash briefing about some Australian startup news. So currently I need to manually update it. That is something I do want to improve on, but it's there if you want to check it out. As I mentioned, I do have a few ideas for improvements, as this is just sort of my first adventure into RSS feeds and those kinds of data. So I think it'd be really great to add more sources of information to the RSS feed, curating the content, because it is only 5 items every time, so making sure that those 5 items are really high value, of high interest to the listeners. And I also think it'd be really cool to add some audio or visual data to it potentially, as some of the Alexas do have little screens, so it could be cool to add visual info or maybe audio from a podcast or something. So always something to improve upon, but I did just want to break it down into something smaller that I could achieve with my skill set, and then be able to make something more interesting. Here are just some reflections, takeaways from myself through developing a skill. There's different entry points to building skills. So if you don't code, there's blueprints. If you do code, you can do the bit at developer console. If you're wanting to try out coding, I think it's also a really great place to, because you can see your code come alive. So I do think it's actually a really fun one to play around with if you are new to developing, and also how there are sort of skeleton code available that you can customize in the developer console as well makes it really a good place to start. You don't need an Alexa device either, as there is the simulator inside the developer console. And my biggest takeaway is to start small on the skill, get one part working, and then sort of expand it, try and do more with it. So that, because I wanted to do all these things at once, but I just needed to scale it back, get a prototype working, and then I'll add in those improvements as I get more comfortable and confident with my developing ability. So start small and iterate. Just try to get something working, and then you're unstoppable. Here's just some resources that may be of interest to you if you are interested in Alexa development. So the developer page, blueprints, the Alexa team GitHub has some great code there for you to have a look at. Just the forums for the Alexa Skill Kit, Alexa Dev's Twitter, and also the Amazon Alexa Team Australia promotions page, as there seems to sometimes be giveaways or competitions, so check that out if you're interested as well. So thank you for listening. I hope this has inspired you to develop an Alexa skill, showed you how easy it is to get started, and please reach out if you've built a skill, been inspired by the talk. I'd love to hear about what you've been working on, so feel free to follow on Twitter or connect on LinkedIn. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of Community Day.